Speaking of funding, we've been hearing a lot of buzz about President Obama's signing of the Jobs Act. The centerpiece of the legislation establishes new guidelines for crowdfunding. When this law goes into effect, visitors to websites such as Kickstarter and Indiegogo will be able to fund companies and receive equity in return. Leaders in the startup community have been pushing for this for nearly a decade. Now that it's finally here, what does this mean? Startup Iowa's Christian Renaud joins us from Des Moines to explain. Hi, Christian, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm dying to ask you about the Jobs Act, but before we get into that, tell us what's going on in Startup Iowa.
We're having a lot of fun. We announced as the 8th region of the Startup America Partnership last December, and we've had a major event essentially every month since. January, we had a statewide trade show for all of our startups. 100 plus startups, 400 plus customers, 7 different locations. A bunch of people sold a lot of product. It was a great time. February, we did a centralized event calendar so startups can find all the great things going on entrepreneurially around the state. In March, we did a wiki of essentially all of the learnings about being a startup in Iowa so all these guys can share knowledge amongst each other. And then in April, we're doing what we call Open Iowa, which is a hackathon of government data, but not only state data, but also Fed, county, and city data throughout the state.
So tell us a little bit about the Jobs Act and what do you think it means for entrepreneurs around the country?
I think it means different things depending on where you are in the country. I mean, if there's a lot of talk about the coasts being startup bubble and being overcapitalized and valuations going through the roof. But if you look at where we are historically, and I've been in this market for a long time, I got a lot of gray hair around my little Princess Leia headphones here.
No hair here.
But you got me beat, though. If you look at where the community is, it's never been cheaper to do a startup, especially tech startups, right? So you have the Jobs Act that comes out, has things like crowdfunding, and says, now I can get people coming in like Kickstarter, your earlier point, and they can start putting money towards these startups that have less capital needs and really create a lot of new business, a lot of new startups, a lot of new jobs with very, very little risk. And it really democratizes the investing community versus just restricted to a few high net worth individuals and venture funds.
What are the risks for startups in doing this? Is there a high regulatory barrier that we have to overcome?
Well, when they did the Jobs Act, what they did is they sort of comprehensively looked at things like SEC regulation A, I think it's A, and then D, certainly, and some of the IPO filing requirements. And what they did is they really dialed those back. They told the SEC they needed to go back and reevaluate some of these things, like how people announce that they're going to do fundraising. Right?
Do you see a big glut of crowdfunding sites and companies being formed in the next, probably 6 months or so?
I wish I could figure out some way to get paid for the number of companies that pop up out of the woodwork. We have 3 million people in the state of Iowa. I know 6 guys or 6 companies just in this state that are starting crowdfunding websites. So that's 3 million of what's the U.S. population, 300 million? So if you want to do some basic math, I think there are going to be a few of those folks, and there's going to be this Cambrian explosion of all these different folks that come up with all sorts of different ideas on how to skin this cat. And there'll be a lot of attrition, a lot of face plants and so forth. And there'll be a few clear winners that emerge from that 2, 3, 4 years from now. A lot of market consolidation. It'll be a really fun time to see a lot of business models tried and succeeded or tried and failed. So
summarize what the Jobs Act means for American entrepreneurs.
So it means quite a few things, but the Cliff Notes version is crowdfunding is something that's been a lot overdue. If you think about it, look at the last 10 years of what it means to start a company. And you got Moore's Law, you got cloud computing, you're driving the cost of building tech startups way down, lower than they've ever historically been. So you have these smaller capital requirements for startups, and then you have anybody individually who can then go invest in those companies in areas that they know. Maybe you know the tech startup down the block. You can invest in those, and you're not prohibited from doing it.
That's awesome. Christian, thanks so much for your time.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Let us know your thoughts by hitting us up on Twitter @StartoTV or on Facebook at facebook.com/StartoTV. We'll be right back.